Okay, so before we get started with actually doing some evaluation today, I want to go over just a couple of things. First, now we did this in December. It's been a while, so hopefully this will come back to you. But when we're talking about doing evaluating, what we're really talking about is substituting. So that means we're plugging a number in for the variable, and then we're simplifying it, or in other words, doing the math. Let me give you an example. If I tell you that D equals 4, well, the first thing I want you to remember is that equals means the same as. So this means D is the same as 4. Well, if it's the same, then wherever I see a D, I could put a 4 instead. Wherever I see a 4, I could put a D instead, right? They're the same. So you can use either one, really. But if you want to get to an answer, if you need to do the math, it's most convenient to put a number in for the variable. So let's see what I mean by that. So if I say D is the same as 4, and then I have 5 plus D, well, then I know I can rewrite this with 5 plus 4, because D is the same as 4, right? So I can totally write it that way. And then I can finish the math, and I know that 5 plus 4 is 9. And that is the process that we're talking about today, right? So that's what we're going to practice and focus on and review. Okay. But before we go too far with that, I want to remind you of some of the different ways that you might see some of these operations. Remember, operations in algebra or in math are these things. These are operations. It means, what are you doing? Are you adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing? Okay. So let's talk about some of the ways that we've seen addition expressed. So if we have two numbers, we could say 3 plus 2. So that's how we would show it if we had numbers. In other words, constants, right? That's the algebra vocab for numbers by themselves, is we would just write them with a plus sign in the middle. Okay? If we have a variable involved, so in other words, if we have 3 plus D, then we would write it with a plus sign in the middle. And we would do the same thing if we have two variables. So we might have D plus E. D plus E. So basically, unless you see a plus sign, you're not adding. So if you're asking yourself, what am I doing here? What does this mean? If you see a plus sign, that means you're adding. And if you don't see a plus sign, you're not going to be adding. Okay? Let's look at the next one, subtraction. So if I have 7 minus 5, that's how I would show it if I just have constants, if I just have numbers and no variables. Okay? If I have variables, I would say 7 minus D. I'll just keep using D. Okay? And if I am subtracting just variables, then I would say D minus E. So again, just like addition, if you don't see a minus sign, then you're not subtracting. If you see a minus sign, then subtracting is what you want to do. Okay, so those are pretty simple. Let's look at the multiplication one. If I have two numbers, say I have 6 and 9, and I need to multiply those, here's how we write that in algebra. We don't use an X. We don't use a dot. We just use parentheses. Okay, so when I have two numbers, two just plain old numbers and no variables, I'm going to put them together with parentheses. Okay, if I do have a variable, then I'm going to write 6D. That looks really confusing, but it's supposed to be a 6 and a D. Okay, whoops, now I've made it worse. Let's change the number to an 8. How's that? Okay, so if I have a number and a variable, in other words, a coefficient and a variable that need to be multiplied, I just write them together. I stick them right there together. And it's the same thing if I need to multiply two variables. I just put them side by side. There's no symbols, okay? The only symbol you're going to use with multiplication is if you have just two plain old numbers, and then you'll use parentheses. Otherwise, you just stick them together, and that means multiplication. Okay, let's look at division. If I have two numbers, let's say that I have 12 and 2, and I need to show division, I'm going to write 12/2, and that shows me division. If I have a variable involved, I'm also going to use the slash to show division. So if I have, for instance, if I have d over 2, that means I'm taking d, whatever d is, and I'm dividing it by 2. Goes from top to bottom. And same thing if I have two variables, I'm going to use that slash. Now the only difference, and it's very slightly different, but you might see things kind of straight up and down like this. They look like a fraction. You might see division written like this. And if you do, that's fine. It means the same exact thing. Okay? So, again, if you're working with addition in algebra, you're going to see a plus sign. If you're working with subtraction, you're going to see a minus sign. And then when we get to multiplication, if you see two things stuck together without any symbols in between, no pluses, no minuses, no nothing, that means multiply. And if you see two numbers that are stuck together with just parentheses, that also means multiply. If you see anything written with a slash mark, that means you're dividing. Okay, so I just want to kind of review those and make sure that you're clear on those. All right, let's do some evaluating, which means, again, we're going to substitute, and then we're going to do the math. So they're telling me that y is the same as 3. So wherever I see a y, I can just write a 3 instead. So I'm going to rewrite this. Instead of y, I'm going to write 3. I'm going to bring down my plus 5. Those don't change. And now I just do the math, and I've got 8. Ta-da! Okay, let's look at the next one. First question to ask yourself is, what are they doing? What are the 3 and the c doing together? Well, I remember that if two things are stuck together, it means they're multiplying. So in this one, it says c is the same as 4, which means that this c can just turn into a 4. I need to remember, though, I can't just write it like this, can I? Because that says 34. So again, you need to remember, how do you show multiplication when it's just numbers? We can kind of slide back to our little table, and it will show us. If I need to show multiplication and I just have numbers, I need those parentheses. Okay, so let's go back here. And there we go. So I'm going to show 3 times 4. That means I need to use the parentheses because that's how we do this in algebra. Okay, and then 3 times 4 is 12, and I'm done. All right, let's look at the next one. What do you think we're going to do with this f minus 1? Well, that's pretty simple because remember what I said. If you see a minus sign, you're going to be subtracting. Okay, so they're telling us that f is the same as 7. Well, there's my f, so I'm going to put a 7 there. 7 minus 1. 7 minus 1 is 6. Done. Last one. How about 20/a? What do they want us to do there? Well, I know that when I see a slash, that's telling me to divide. And I also know that if they're telling me a is the same as 2, that wherever I see an a, I can write a 2. So I'm going to rewrite this, 20 divided by 2. And I know that 20 divided by 2 is 10. Ta-da! So that is your review on evaluating. I really super duper hope that that was helpful. And that you are going to feel like you can do your worksheet now. Remember, if you're struggling still or it's a little confusing, that's what teachers are for. Let people help you, okay? So it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to try it on your own and then let the teacher look at it and send it back to you and say, make some corrections here. There's no pressure. We just need you to do your best, and then we'll go from there because that's how we learn, okay? All right.